Rock it like he's doing. Rock it like he's doing. Rock it like he's doing.
Morning. How's everyone doing? Oof. How is everyone doing? Have we got the mic on? Yeah, the mic's on. It's just not very near me. Here we go. Here we go. Right. Let's pop into thingy. Oh. That's upsetting. That's extremely upsetting. My, that's working. This is not working. This is a pretty basic webcam that never really fails me. But at the moment it's decided, you know what? You're on time for your stream, you're a bunch of other stuff. We're gonna just stop working. Really? Oh yeah. Am I gonna have to? What am I gonna have to do? I'm going to have to figure that out. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's all there was to it. That's all there was to it. Oh, it's a nice little start to our morning. Right, where were we? Okay, so you may notice there was some progress off stream. A little bit of that color there. So we don't actually need this thread at the moment. What we need to do is we need to find a thread close to this, but not this color, to do the red section. So we want it close to this, but not actually this color, to do the red section. Yeah, to be honest, yesterday was not a great brain day for me. A whole bunch of stuff was happening. So I worked through some mandatory training videos at work, because that's a thing that we have to do occasionally. And as I was working through mandatory training videos, I was like, well, I'm here and I'm working through these training vids. Let me just cross stitch while I do it. And it actually really helped. That actually really helped, because it's one of the things I used to do when I was in university and stuff, is I would paint my nails constantly, or I'd doodle in class, all that kind of stuff. And anyone who actually knew me knew that if I was doodling in your class, I was much more likely to actually be paying attention than if I was just sitting there staring forward. If I was sitting there staring forward, I was probably just asleep. Excuse me. Because in order to focus on a thing, to give a thing my attention, to not have my brain wander, I need to have a thing to do with my hands, or a thing just to distract me, really. Otherwise I get distracted. I need a little bit of distraction to stay focused. That's basically how clear brain work, clear brain go boom, and just need a little bit of something. But people who don't know me very well may think that means I'm always all over the place and blah 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 and zoomies and all that jazz. That's not the case either. That's just if I need to focus on an external input, whatever that external input may be, usually someone talking or something, then either there's two ways. You need to emotionally engage me, or I need to fidget. If I'm emotionally engaged, like watching a show I really care about, or listening to impassioned rhetoric. Oh, I love listening to good old fashioned like dialogue and rhetoric. It's one of the reasons I enjoy streaming, because there are some streamers I've watched who really have the form down. They really have that whole discourse and that whole flow of language perfectly nailed. But if I'm listening to something, and especially if it's something I've got to think quite hard about while I'm listening to it, which is the case with complicated subjects, then I need to fidget. So I don't wander off. However, if I'm just thinking, then I don't need to fidget. I need to have a repetitive, preferably physical task, like walking. Walking's one of my favorites. Washing the dishes, doing some sort of repetitive house chore that I've done many times before works really well for me. Then I can properly think. Properly think. One of the things that it took me a while to realize, because I used to justify it by going on walks, right, when I was working. So I'd be like, I'm going for a walk. No one would really question that. But then I got comfortable enough in myself that I'd be like, I'm going to go sit over there and think. Or I would just not announce that I'm doing it. I would just go sit over and think. And it's kind of scary not to be sat at your desk, not to be making the appearance of busy work. It's like, no. The important thing is that I solve this problem. The important thing is I move the ball forward. It's not that I appear to be moving the ball forward. It's a tough nut to crack, that, because I think a lot of people get rather intimidated. Proud fidget doer. Oh yeah, that's a good expression. Fidget doer, fidgeteer. Ooh, there we go. Proud fidgeteer. I'm going to just do one piece of floss for this. The single piece of floss is actually still two pieces of thread woven together. So it is still composite. It gives it some friction, some tension in the line. Just push that through there. And just parked this thread here because I was like, make sure in the morning when the light is better and you can see and think that you didn't miss anything, Claire, because I do have a tendency to miss things. Can be a little bit disorganized. Something I plan to do today that I have not done in a while, to be honest, is I was talking to a friend because I saw that Media Molecule tweeted some stuff, and I was like, I wonder if my code is going to go live. It's not, unfortunately, not yet. But they're doing a nice little update. And Liam and Bogdan did a stream, and it's always fun to see those two together, just nattering away. So I figured I would go give them an old listen later in the day, find out what they've been up to on that. Probably at 2 times speed or something similar, because life is too short. Yeah, as I say, like information, when I just need to get information dumped in my head, I often listen to people speak at 1.5 speed, like pauses removed and all that kind of stuff, and I just blast it in. However, the moment, and this is honestly what I aspire to and the thing I enjoy, the moment there is melody and rhythm in someone's speech, the moment it is a pleasing oration, I'm 100% tuned in. I don't want to speed it up, I don't want to slow it down. I just want to listen to it at the... it's the same way you can't speed up or slow down music. You can't speed up or slow down a really good talk. Someone who's confident in their pauses, who's just enjoying the subject matter, just really digging their teeth in, unafraid. You get it in theatre, you do get it in theatre, but in theatre you get a processed version of it. I mean, it's still raw, it's still human, it's still very, very, very delicious. But it's delicious in the way that it's delicious in the way that a restaurant meal is delicious. It is a manufactured good that is directed by a recipe for success. It's a recipe for repetition, whereas to listen to really good oration, you're with the speaker as they discover the subject matter. You're with the speaker as they work through the problem and find the words to describe what it is that they're seeking, and they're trying to move with the rhythm of their audience. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. It's really just one of those things that I don't think enough people appreciate. Because the honest truth is, a lot of people just never really get exposed to it. It's a point of privilege, to be honest, to have enough time to really dig into oration. Though it's also naive to the extreme to think it is the domain of the wealthy. Some of the best orators of history have been what's the word we're looking for? Populace? Not of the working class. I mean, they are often of the working class, but I mean, their venues are, bars and music halls, and their venues are what's the word I'm looking for here? Humble, I suppose. No, that's not fair. Some of the most wonderful stages of orators are famous places that are improvised. Improvised is the word. Flexible, multi-use spaces. There's spaces of the people. There's places where people live, Someone standing on the table at the cafeteria delivering arousing speech is one of those things that, yeah, I take great pleasure in. There's no two ways about it. It's a kind of, yeah, why is it better on an improvised stage rather than behind a podium? Now, don't get me wrong, I've seen many a great speaker work from a podium, though I will hasten to add, everyone I have seen who is a great speaker from the podium is speaking words never spoken. They're speaking things that maybe they have thought or expressed before, but there's new words, there's new context to the words. And it's one of the reasons why listening to a great commencement speech, for example, is just way more fascinating than listening to an audiobook by the same person on the same topic. Because unlike the audiobook, which has been edited and reviewed and drafted and polished, the great oration is usually something that the person has been thinking about in the back of their head, wanting to deliver, but they have been thinking about it very much in the context of the venue, very much in the context of the people who will receive the little bit of wisdom they're trying to dole out that day. They won't be thinking about it in the sense of this is a speech that I'm gonna give in some generic fashion. It's not. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. I think the House of Commons and Parliament and the House of Lords can be a place of great speeches. It's rare these days. It's rare these days, with point scoring and, frankly, with the recording of Parliament, it's become less common. But yeah, some of the great orators of the past have definitely been political in nature. It's one of those skills they used to really need to have. It was basically the equivalent of having TV skills now, which are super important, basically. I think anyone who can't be good on television now can't be a politician, right? It's just one of those things, because it's part of the job, or at least not at a national level. You can probably manage at a local level without television skills, but at a national level you need to be able to go on an interview and do yourself proud, so to speak. But oration, it's a thing I enjoy. Yeah. I suppose it's that improvisation, that that uniqueness, the feeling of this is a one-time thing, this is a one-time deal. We get to see it, and then it's one and done. Gonna cross back because I don't know, actually. I might have enough to finish this whole... Yeah, I might have enough to finish this whole section. Let's go for it. Let's go for it. Choo-choo, motherfuckers. We're going to run the train and see how far we get. I'm gonna back on this particular stitch because I think that's gonna be a cleaner stitch if I do it this way, because I learnt my lesson from the other loop that I did all of 10 seconds ago. Okay, and back it up. Yeah, go. Yeah, it's always tough because like some of the most boring entertainment can be one person speaking to themselves, or it can be two heads speaking to each other. Like there is a. It's funny to me that what I consider the most intense, the most entertaining format can also for so many times be the most boring format. And I think that speaks volumes to the artistry of oration, the artistry of the monologue. The fact that it can be at the same time considered the highest form and the worst form is, I suppose it just makes it the Dark Souls of entertainment. It's like that tired old metaphor is tried out whenever someone doesn't want to think too hard about what they want to compare about. And they're like, this thing has a skillful depth from beginner to expert that is unforgiving. It's the Dark Souls of culinary skills. It's the Dark Souls of, I don't know, fucking venture capital. I suppose it speaks volumes to the niche cultural impact that it has. You know what it is? Dark Souls feels like Citizen Kane. Now, Citizen Kane, don't get me wrong, it's a pivotal movie. It's a very interesting movie. It's, oh dear. If you're interested in film school and all that jazz, at some point you will be exposed to Citizen Kane. It's a fact of life. Citizen Kane is one of those things. I do not mean to disparage Citizen Kane. However, it is not the all-encompassing node of cinema that people make it out to be. It's just a focal point. It's become a cultural focal point. And as such, for years, I mean to this day to be honest, people use it as a measuring stick, a yardstick for other media. They're like, yeah, but is it the Citizen Kane of da-da-da? And it just feels like Dark Souls has become that. It's become a lazy point of comparison. It's not that Dark Souls was, the second coming of video games or anything. It's just, it was relatively niche, Not many people knew about Dark Souls for a long time. Dark Souls' success was a very slow burn, and the fans were very proud of its exclusionary thing. Yep, Citizen Kane is assigned viewing on most of those courses pretty early on. Just is what it is. It's not bad necessarily, but it's basically, Dark Souls is the same thing. If you were to go to university and study game design, Dark Souls would come up extremely quickly. It's not mean to say that it's not worth studying. It's just it's like World War II. It's an interesting subject for history students, and it's contemporary and it's broad in scope, but it's overanalyzed to the point where is there any more useful academic discourse? I mean, really, if you plumb so many young minds into such an explored field, then their new thoughts cannot find purchase. There's no ground on which for them to potentially make a break, Though in some ways it does encourage a subversive analysis and a subversive approach, because all of the approaches are so tired, but there's only so much subversion on top of subversion before you have someone doing stop motion macaroni analysis of Citizen Kane. Likewise, you have someone make Atari demakes of Dark Souls and similar manufactured pieces. It's interesting. It's like how so many philosophy students spend so much time, and I wouldn't even say philosophy students, I'd just say philosophy in general spends so much time focusing on Aristotle and Plato when, I mean, the real point, the reason we focus so much on them is because most of their predecessors don't have very good written record. So they appear more original than most because they're where a period of recording started. And also, it's like Shakespeare, Shakespeare's a good chap. Interesting plays. But too many young minds are turned too long on that lathe. Makes smooth brains. It's, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think all drama students at some point should be exposed to Shakespeare, but not with the veracity and frequency at which we expose both drama and English students to Shakespeare. When we don't expose them to so many other great playwrights of the years. And also these days Shakespeare is taught in a much more participatory way. So it's better. But back in the day, many a teacher, and to be honest, still today, some bad teachers will do it. They'll read Shakespeare. They'll treat Shakespeare with seriousness, and it's like, bitch, you're reading the equivalent to the Fast and the Furious franchise in serious tones. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some pieces that Shakespeare did that were definitely more solemn than others. But it's fucking the equivalent of dick jokes and fart moments in Shakespeare, which again I feel is something that culturally we've come to acknowledge to the point where I don't think that would be a surprise to anyone. I think that's a pretty broadly held opinion. It was considered controversial and subversive. Oof. As recently as the early 90s, I'd say. And I think a lot of non-native English speakers probably still think Shakespeare is this formal giant of language, where the real truth that non-native speakers should take from Shakespeare is the proof that English is an absurd and delightful thing without rules. And to understand English is better to understand everything else and ignore English. Understanding French, understanding pop culture, is almost more important than understanding and studying the language of English. Because just make up a new word. Who the bloody hell cares, But again, I think, and I'm biased on this, being an English native speaker, I've got some exposure to other languages though, but I do think that English, more than most, is a language of wordplay. It's a language of absurd mutation. We've seen textual and audio memes in other languages. So it's not to say that English has a monopoly on them, but English definitely has a dominance of them to the point where non-native English speakers are more likely to meme in English than in any other language. I find it interesting and honestly quite satisfying to see that, for instance, the whole German subreddit of their equivalent of oh god, what's it called? Not IRL. It's their equivalent of. There's a setup phrase like me when or whatever it is. I forget the exact verbiage, but needless to say, there is a German version of this that's thoroughly embraced and active, and I think any German native speaker or second language speaker should enjoy and revel in the fact that it's a thing. Yeah. It's weird. Yeah, language is weird. And you know, there's some forms that we hold so dear. Like, for example, this whole concept of free speech. It's not a universal concept by any means. I mean, even in America, there is controls and limitations put on it because we realize that everything requires moderation. But in Europe, free speech is by no means a guarantee. However, we've always had pressure valves. Going back to the Greeks, where they'd have these, and the Romans, where they'd have these platforms, literal platforms in the market square where crazy people and just plain orators and seers and all kinds of stuff could basically be on these little plinths, and they could rant about how the world was actually a donut and blah blah blah. And it was a pressure valve, but it was an isolated pressure valve, and you couldn't do and say those things when you had stepped off that. Likewise, in the UK, we had a similar thing. Well, we still have it. At the moment, it's not alive and well because, COVID. Which is interesting because I don't actually know the full history of Speaker's Corner, in the sense of, I don't know if Speaker's Corner was shut down during the Black Plague. But Speaker's Corner is a wonderful magnet, a honeypot, if you will, for the crazy speech of lunatics. And so you can go there any day and see someone espousing about the Illuminati and about Donald Trump and about all this stuff. And, a lot of advocates of free speech will tell you that it's a wonderful place of expression and da-da-da. And, there are some great orators there. They're orating about their topics which are absurd and nonsensical and probably best left alone. But at the same time, they're almost like a cultural warning sign, a shingle in the window saying, look, this is what the crackpots currently think. The police only have to watch one spot. It's rather useful. Younger men of the new Afghanistan trying to use English memes on Twitter. Yeah. Taliban 2.0, as they call it. Well, the truth is, most of the support staff and the social media staff were born in the developed world and have been radicalized and are now using their meme talent to make murderous villains appear to be less foul. It's just the new age of propaganda. I mean, that's the other problem with the love of oration, is sometimes you find yourself listening to great orators who are speaking absolutely vile things. There was an art project. Oh, God, this was years ago. I'm trying to remember if it was live or might have been on YouTube. Can't recall now. But it was someone who basically took all of Hitler's speeches and translated them as best as they could to English, and not transliterated them, but really tried to capture them in modern English, and did the best and most passionate and close to form delivery of these speeches. Because it was 2017, I think they did it, if I recall, because it was a reaction to 2016 and everything that happened in that year. And their whole point was to remove the scary sounding German that so many people associate, the whole like angry Hitler thing. And it totally wasn't like that. A lot of your associations are to do with language, and the rest are to do with selectively pulled clips. The narrative we painted, for in the newsreels for the war and all that jazz. But yeah, it was a scary thing to see. It was a very scary thing to see. I mean, just the other day when I was doing my walk, speaking about great oration, turning tides, I came across a memorial to something I had, I think, read about in the past, but I'd never really taken in, because I got it confused initially because it shared a reference with one of my favorite books by Terry Pratchett, The Night Watch. And knowing Terry Pratchett and his writing style, I know he was intentionally referencing this now. But there's a thing called the Cable Street Riots. And what it was between World War I and II, people forget that fascism was on the rise pretty much everywhere in the world. And there was this whole, I forget what it's called, fifth wave, third column. I forget the exact numbering and the terminology, because it's been memed so much on pop culture with slight variations that I can't remember the original. But it was basically this project to incite fascism and support, and to basically keep countries out of the war for as long as possible, or preferably win the countries onto Germany's side, by funding local dissidents to espouse political views aligned with the Nazi Party. They would send small monetary support, but they would also give advice and blueprints, very similar to stuff that goes on today. It's a very old tactic to basically forward this viewpoint. And anyway, it turns out in London there was a fairly active fascist wing, and they were doing an organized march, totally legal, signed off by the police and all that jazz, because people again don't realize that most of the times when people are doing something really wrong, it's legal. It was legal at the time. And their plan was to march up Cable Street, and Cable Street at the time was very working class. You've got to understand, there's the start of the socialist movement in the UK at this time. Well, not so much the start, but the maturation. It was the seeds of what would later become the Labour Party and the great UK socialist movement. The movement had already somewhat started there, but workers for workers' sake, rising up against landlords, all that jazz. And there was also a lot of Jewish tenants in the area. And basically, the whole neighborhood got together and blockaded the street to not allow this march to pass. And it came to a head, and it was a whole thing. But they stopped the march. They stopped the march, and it was a moment of a real tinderbox moment. A moment in history that is not known by many, I think. But there's so many moments like that where you discover a mural or a thing, and you're like, there's a little bit of history that happened here. What is that little bit of history? In this case, It was just another little corner of the world fighting a vile opinion. Because people are mostly good. Oh dear, we've lost the... we've overheated on the capture cam again. I need to figure out my actual solution for that. I will figure it out. I got myself a nice new camera. Not for this. I got it because I went on that walk on Friday and I was like, I haven't had a proper camera. You know, a camera that lenses and full frame sensor and all that jazz in a very long time. I saw an older model Sony camera and I was like, I'm gonna buy that. So I bought it. Then I thought I'd ordered an SD card. I hadn't. So then I ordered the SD card. Amazon says, we delivered it. It's like, no you didn't. And so I'm going back and forth with Amazon on that at the moment. Yes, it's really interesting that we now live in the recorded era of history. World War II is really when filmed records really started kicking off. Written records, you know, we've got pretty good written records dating back to the Greeks and the Roman Empire. It's really when... One of the reasons why I think we study the Romans so much is because just how much was written about them. And in terms of perspective from the everyday person, written records really kick off in Victorian era. There is a wonderful book. I'm tempted to go dig it off my shelf now, actually. It was the first of its kind. But basically, I want to say Henry Mayhew. I may have got that wrong. But he was a friend of Dickens. And was part of this small liberal cabal, which included Peel, who was the father of modern policing, Dickens, a wealthy old widower whose name I forget, and a bunch of other social reformers at the time. There's a list on Wikipedia. They had a name. I forget their name. Anyway, social reformers of their time. And one of the seminal works that was done at the time, because people know about Dickens' crusade to shut down the workhouses and to improve conditions. And you know, Dickens basically did it through fiction. He wrote fictional accounts of all of this stuff. And that's how he popularized it with this serial novel format. Serialized novel. Anyway, going through all of that, he, his friend, I believe it was Henry Mayhew, had this project where all he would do is go up to regular everyday Londoners, from members of Parliament, but which, you know, had been done before, but he also went up to the flower girls on the street who picked flowers from the graves and rearranged them for sale. Common thing back then, picking flowers from the graves and rearranging for sale. It's where most of the flower girls in the street got their wares. And people who trawled the sewers for trash to resell, and people who would burn charcoal in the forests outside of London or inside London, and then they would sell charcoal in the streets. Street sweepers, thieves, musical performers, all these kinds of folk. And he would basically ask them questions about their lives, very dull questions about their routine, how much they made, where they lived, what was a typical day like, that kind of stuff. He just wrote it all down. And it is an extremely accurate and brutal portrayal of London at the time. And the oldest record of that kind that we have, true reflection of day-to-day life. So many times, for so many cultures, the only things that we have recorded prior to that are the lives of the gods, the lives of politicians and famous people, and usually told through press releases effectively. So yeah, Mayhew's work is seminal. And yet I know of no history class that assigns it as a text. I know literally, again, the reason I discovered it was Terry Pratchett and his novel Dodger, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it. That was the reason I discovered it. And when in the afterward he mentioned this fabulous book, I just had to order it. And I've skimmed it a few times. It's not really a book you read, it's a book you study. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Of course now, you go back to the 70s and you start to get selected pieces of footage start to creep out of everyday life. By the 80s you have actual records of home life, unedited, recorded, but still in segments and formal situations because it was still expensive to film. And then 2008, vlogging and the culture of performative online unedited work becomes a thing. A lot of people don't know that the first vlog was actually a fictional. The first vlogger was a fictional construct. I forget her name, something like Cute Girl 95 or something. I forget the exact thing, but she was entirely constructed and scripted and wasn't real at all. But she inspired the format. She inspired the very real format. And if you want to talk about Citizen Kane and mediums advancing and stuff, I'd say the great evolution of the vlogging format that is worth study, just worth genuine study. Like, I'm not being facetious here. It's Casey Neistat and what he did to the vlogging format and how he brought cinematic storytelling and linear narrative editing to the vlogging format. And basically, most of the successful vlogs of today largely follow recipe and formula laid down by him. That and, there's two schools, that and what I would call the Logan Paul school. The Logan Paul school was actually invented by someone else whose name eludes me right now. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's full circle. I wouldn't say it's full circle at all. When we sometimes humans get obsessed with cyclic patterns, when really the pattern isn't cyclic, but more correctly described as, I suppose, spiral. It's we have trends which tend to reflect the past and be somewhat cyclic in the short term, but in the long term, the trend line is a lot more linear is not the phrase. There's a kind of data analysis we do, and again, I'm going to mess up the words. I think it's not called Brownian motion. Anyway, if you look at the stock market, for example, and you take the average time in the stock market, and basically you get a trend line, and then you subtract that trend line from the actual daily stock price. You basically get this noise in the stock market that is almost completely random. That's the noise, the day-to-day noise that we see when we're looking at the stock market and we're looking at human trend patterns. But the reality, if you zoom out on a stock, is you can see the hyper acceleration of capitalism, especially when you examine broader, like when you examine across the stock market and such, and you don't focus on one stock. You can see the broader trend, the periods of deregulation, the ebb and flow of the economic world. Mostly you can see when certain laws were passed and certain things deregulated, but it's a very clear progression. It's not at all a spiral, it's not at all a circle. It sometimes feels like a circle, because the moment anything happens, especially anything shocking, the first thing the human brain does is, what can I compare this to? What prior experience do I have to map this out? Something furry with 4 legs and claws jumps out at you from a bush. You don't genuinely take in the beast. You go, oh shit, tiger, and you try to deal with it. And it's a good coping mechanism. It allows us to process high amounts of data very efficiently, but it does come with a problematic set of biases we sometimes have to analyze. Because the trend is towards progress, which is a good thing. Progress isn't always, progress in a positive direction. It can be negative trends over time, but generally speaking, humans make things better over time. It's one of those things. One of those things that we do. We're very good at improving our lot. Something that humanity's gotten a bit of a knack for, shall we say. But yeah, it is definitely interesting that you go back to Plato and Aristotle, and most of the accounts of them are secondhand, and the only records of these celebrity figures is written text, which is translated and reascribed multiple times, and usually, as I say, from second-hand point of view, because they themselves didn't write it down. There's some texts like Aristotle's Republic and such, which survived mostly intact. But then you take that to the extreme now, where you can see footage of New York in the 90s, unedited raw footage, piled hours on top of hours. You can see documentaries sliced from personal video of Kurt Cobain about the time in Nirvana. And not just the band performance and stuff, but the mundane, the absolute mundane. Now you look at a figure, a celebrity. You look at someone like, I don't know, what's his name? Nicky Avocado, whatever, the violinist who spiraled into mukbang and went from being a depressed, single, aspiring youth in New York to married, overweight, depressed, medically in danger mukbang streamer on full meltdown. And you can chart the course through video and through internet documentation of his life. You know, as sad as it is. That's a development. It's a development of sorts. I mean, if you're interested in sociology and trends of people and what people do to themselves, it's a valuable information source. And soon, in the near future, it won't just be video, but we'll start talking about brainwaves, and we'll start to talk about the landscape. And, you know, we'll look back at this footage from the 2000s and go, wait, they just captured one angle? It's like, yeah, no, they didn't have light field cameras everywhere back then. It's like, oh, that's so weird. Someone will be like, wait, so this footage is without ambience and alternative views? Yes, they typically used one camera. They didn't use drone clouds and ambisonics. It's like, oh, that's so primitive. No, don't worry, we can run an AI and simulate more of it. And then someone goes, oh, but how can we tell what they were thinking? There's no brain scan recording. Well, you know, it's the wondrous thing of the time. Their thoughts were unrecorded except those that they wished to express. Yeah, we'll move on, we'll advance, we'll do things. It'll be a thing. Is what it is. Progress. Progress in all its forms. But one thing I will say that has remained constant through this entire time is the ability of humans to stand before a crowd or just a group of friends and spin a good yarn, tell a good tale, convey ideas in a passionate oration, not a prepared and written speech, not a formalized thing, but an impermanent, momentary expression of an idea. As you can tell, I'm rather enamored with the form. I just love how ancient and how new it is, and it always feels fresh, and we always do things with it. I mean, the mere fact that, as I say, so many of the people I admire who do it now do it through the internet and do it through all kinds of crazy tech and mediums and engagement and stuff, and, you know, digital campfires. It's yeah, it's easy to get very it's easy to fucking blow smoke up one's own ass about this shit and to get too high and mighty on oration. Though I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it a great deal. And I have no qualms expressing that enjoyment. Because, as I say, it's I think, sorry, I'm thinking about ways to perfect this stitch. There we go. Here we go, that'll tie it down, that'll secure it. Yeah, I'm just a big fan of human condition. It's one of the reasons why I love post-humanism and stuff, is because, you know, we're going to have to evolve, we're going to have to survive through AI and all of the all of the conditions we've wrought on the world. And I want us to be able to continue to enjoy meat space in the broadest and brutish sense of the term. Those cults in the 70s and 80s really missed out on the internet wave. Did they? Cults of the 70s and 80s rode the VHS and the recorder wave and new printed media wave. They did their own thing. The modern publishing wave and how much easier it was to get a book printed was a big driver of cults back then. Now the cults are just a bit more online. They've shifted and they've altered in patterns because these things always do. But many an online cult. I mean, we think about the 70s and 80s cults so clearly because they're so clearly identifiable to us now. I think the cults of the 2020s are going to be very well understood, analysed, and in retrospect, well defined to people 10, 20 years from now. It just feels a bit too raw, a bit too new to analyse yet. Of course, the other problem is the analysis is now poisoned by noise. It's one of the reasons why modern historians are much better off than old historians, because we now take a relativistic view of history and we realise there's not a single truth to record. And the modern way of studying history is a lot more understanding of nuance. It does mean that studying history now feels less like studying a shared truth and more like trying to find truth among the noise. But whenever there's a shared singular truth, you should definitely question. I mean, there's cases where it's like 1 + 1 = 2. Well, unless you want to become a set theory mathematician and really deconstruct abstract theories, the chances are 1 + 1 = 2. Leave it alone. The Earth is round. Yes, it's round. We've got quite a solid piece of evidence and stuff, and It's been analysed here, and here's over 2,000 years of human study on the subject matter. But then someone says to you, I don't know, parasocial relationships are at the root of modern disconnection. It's like, wow, now that's a pretty new theory. Evidence looks good, but do we yet have enough information gathered? Becomes down there. That's where you should start applying your skeptical mind, because how much data do we have? Have we not always had parasocial relationships? Has the word just entered the lexicon of pop culture, so it's easy to discuss subject matter now, and rarely are the people who are having any discourse. Sorry, I immediately thought about Discord and the etymology of the name, and the company seems to revel in something that is, I wouldn't say harmful to humanity, but is generally we try to avoid discord, but discord has got the same root as discourse, which is very useful. Anyway, people discussing parasocial relationships, how often are they actually diving into the theories, and how much are they just repeating accepted wisdom and projecting onto their own particular situation. You know, they themselves are formulaic renditions of the form. Well, sounds pretentious. Is a bit pretentious, to be fair. But really what I'm just saying is, have they got their own bloody take on it? Have they got something new to say? Because oration without purpose, it's like junk food. You don't want to listen to someone with nothing to say. I mean, sometimes it's wonderful to listen to an absurdist play with language, but it's not that they have nothing to say. The medium is the subject matter. You know, they're playing around with the nature of words. It's fun and interesting. But you do get some of these people who are stun-locked by interaction or on a loop, and they're not progressing towards a point. They're not thinking very hard about what they said. They're just uttering. And that's, I think, a less constructive form of discourse. Because, it's the difference between shallow and deep thinking. Shallow thinking gets you a lot of value. There's a lot of value in that optimization and that tiger jump out from the bush kind of mental optimization we do, the short-circuiting of thought. But slow, deep thoughts, long conversations, these are necessary things. And I think things that are generally held in high esteem by the youth of today, which is a good thing to see. Again, something that looks very cyclic, because someone looking at it superficially may go, wow, this is just harking back to older times and da-da-da. It's like, is it really? Because now a lot of these long-form conversations that people are talking about are recorded, fast forward, played quickly, clipped, memed, dissected. The bulk of Joe Rogan fans do not listen to the full Joe Rogan podcast. They're mostly consuming derivative media, derivative discourse. But there is always the seminal text there. There is always the full-length interview. Almost like, oh dear. This is just knotted horribly. I was going to say, it's almost like the Lutherans and the biblical stuff, where it's like, you always have easy access to the Bible and the interpretations, and the moving on from. I suppose if you were to think of the editors and the producers as clergy, the overthrowing of the clergy towards more communal interpretations of the text. And in some ways, the rise of long form is that exactly. It's people trying to escape the yoke of the edited interview. People desperately seeking that genuineness. But it's tricky, it's like, what is genuine discourse? Because, in many cases, You could have a Joe Rogan-like figure. I don't honestly know what level he does for prep and things like that. But you can have that kind of figure doing that kind of thing where prior the producers have agreed talking points and bits and such. And, does that diminish the form? It's an interesting question. It is an interesting question, like, are we truly looking for the unprepared? As previously established, we're not looking for the rehearsed and the scripted. There is passion in the thespian monologue, but it's, as I said at the start, it's a restaurateur's passion. It's a repeatable recipe. It's the art of capturing lightning in a bottle and being able to rinse and repeat for capitalist performance. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it's a fascinating ability. One of the hardest skills of acting is to capture and snapshot that emotion, that rawness, and to be able to trot it out on demand. But there's a big difference between that, as we said, and the improvised oration skills that we're really discussing here. And so, yeah, is that a gradient? Is there some hard chasm, in this, because it's easy to say, it's all just shades of grey, but in reality, most things aren't linear, evenly distributed gradient from black to white. There's hot spots and cliffs like the uncanny valley, that exist, that draw natural lines of demarcation in data sets. Sometimes we overemphasize them, but they are there. We come across them in nature all the time. And so, need it be the case that two strangers walk off the street and begin impromptu discourse? Is that even a useful conversation? So they don't have a common starting point or relationship to base the discussion on. Will the discussion be as interesting when half of the discussion is discovering who they are to each other and what meaningful subject to digest? Or is it more interesting to have friends who agree on many things and have spoken many times, have a subject with rough talking points and an outline, maybe a conversation they've had before, and they're having it fresh in a new context, and they're exploring the space, but it's a familiar space. It's not a known space, it's not the rigid form of a script, but it's a well-trodden path. Is that now a different subject and form? Is that a different art? Where do we draw the line on that? It's an interesting conundrum. One I enjoy thinking about. Because, as I say, now that long form discourse is profitable once more, you will see it. Because again, coming back to Aristotle and Plato, they were the celebrities of their time. They were the Tom Hanks and Cruise, and they were the Joe Rogans and whatnot of their time. They were very much public performers with fans and followers and adoration. And, they didn't have the printed press to spread their words like later people did. They didn't have the internet and live streaming and all that jazz. But they had followers and scribes and fans and sponsors and patrons. Patrons. The modern equivalent. Now there's a finance system we rediscovered that favors the format that we're just talking about now. Yeah. It is a thing, you know. The Sistine Chapel was a commissioned art piece. It's always worth remembering that. Everyone's like, you're selling out. It's like, yep. Because I'm good enough to sell out. I mean, there is a big difference between taking a payday and compromising one's beliefs for the machinery of capitalism. God, I'm really harking on capitalism this morning, aren't I? Sorry, there is a particular issue in the back of my mind that's sticking in my craw that is not worth discussing this morning, but it does make me reflect negatively on our socioeconomic status. He donated to Van Gogh's GoFundMe. The man could have used one. His commercial and critical success came after he died. It's not a mistake, that. It's not a mistake. You know, artists of a certain type are very hard to monetize. They get in the way, you know, of being a product because they're too much of a person. But once they're dead, once all you have is profit to gain from a collected backlog of works, which is no longer going to grow, the artist isn't all of a sudden going to rave about how wonderful, I don't know, some distasteful thing at the time is. You know, they're not going to all of a sudden cancel themselves on Twitter and devalue their artwork. So, yeah. The dead artist is the best artist for many. As upsetting as that is. But I think we also fetishize it quite a bit. Because if someone has some support, they can advance their medium and their form and their craft. I think someone who really understands the joy of language and the joy of this oration that I'm talking about is All Gas No Brakes, or it's now called Channel 5 News, Andrew Callahan. He is someone who started out by just hitchhiking places and listening to people's stories. You know, he's had a lifetime fascination with it. And he's really managed to refine the form. You know, I think Andrew Callahan is truly doing what Mayhew did back in the Victorian era, because the vox pop done by so many journalists, let's catch short segments and take them out of context and whatnot, that has been popular for quite some time. The man on the street and all that jazz. So artificial. And yet Andrew Callahan goes into places of great emotion and passion and really lets the people express their unvarnished view. Yes, it is a shame. But have you seen their new truck with the new wrapping and everything? They've even got merch. The wheels of capitalism continue to fund this inherently... this is the thing. I want art to get money because I want the artist to continue to do the thing. That's why I'm fully in favor of selling out. It's also why I highly encourage people not to commercialize their hobbies if they don't need to. There's great value in keeping finance out of your thing. Now, if you can get paid, but just if you're able to keep a hobby to yourself, maybe just keep it away from, you can share it with others and stuff, but maybe just keep it away from capitalism. It's really funny, some of the discussions me and Evans had about dreams and about, he had some very hippie concepts on how to go about it. Principles, which I really agreed on. Some things that, probably aren't as popular. Remix culture and freedom to just create and share, and, not being blocked off by artificial limits. Makes some things very difficult. Share with others on the blockchain. Oh my god. Is a distasteful concept. Technically interesting, don't get me wrong. I find crypto fascinating. Just, why must scarcity be so artificially reinforced? Should be moving to a post-scarcity world, reducing our energy footprint. I'm not trying to just rinse and repeat patterns of old. That to be said, there is value in crypto in the sense of cryptography itself is valuable, and there are going to be times when we want to be able to verify tokens and things like that. But really, is it the best way to get an artist fed? That's really what it comes down to. Because the reality of most game developers and most artists and most everything, they want to make enough money to make another thing and to get on by. No one begrudges a success. It's nice to be a millionaire and whatever. Payday and all that. It's like, whenever someone says money doesn't bring you happiness, well, debt brings you a shit ton of unhappiness. So, get that payday. You go get it. But, you've got to question how much of that payday is going to fund future art. And how much of that payday becomes just another money laundering financial scheme by which people can exercise the power of capital to grow value from, moving numbers about. There's a big difference between that and a bunch of patrons going, we like what you're doing. It's a good thing. We want to see more of it in the world. Here's some money. Go make more of it. The thing I like about patronage more than so many other forms of recompensance is it's inherently a trusting thing. Like, you don't become a patron of someone and then go like, well, you can only make this kind of thing because this is what I'm giving you my patronage for. No. When you give someone patronage, you're like your past work, I am interested into what your future work will be. It is, you may dislike the direction they move in and remove your patronage. That's fair and fine. But inherently you are trusting that the process, the artistic and creative process from this person whose artistic talents and taste you trust will produce more of the thing you want. And I think that's fabulous. I think that's really rather fabulous. There's also the sorry, my brain, I'm trying to just desperately pull out the last bit of stitching from this needle because I don't want to have to run out of stitching and have to rethread for one bloody square. No, two bloody squares. Damn it. I'm most certainly going to have to do something about this. Okay. I'm just trying to push. Yes, I realize how ridiculous this looks. Just trying to push the... Oh god, it's almost 10 o'clock. I've totally overrun because I have been speaking about a thing I am passionately engaged in. Motherfucker. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if there is a way I can... Ah, you got it. No, don't got it. No. That is upsetting. It's genuinely upsetting. I'll show you what I mean. I'm so close to... I was like, oh, that's the last bit of the colour. And I think that's the other thing. Not only was I talking about a thing I liked, but I could see I'm so close to finishing. Okay, let's show you guys the progress. So off stream, I did the waterline there. That side there, and then we just did that side there, and then we've been doing both colors here. But now if you look, you'll see there, that half stitch just ran out. Just ran out. It's frustrating as hell. And you can see it. Oh, first of all, look at that beautiful. There's the back stitches we always show off. But look at that beautiful run there of just wonderful. Oh, come on, focus. You know you want to focus. That beautiful run there of. Really does not want to focus, does it? Yeah, and then there we've got a really nice run, and you can see just how clean that run is. And at the end, we've just run out, just run out. It's infuriating. It's infuriating. But it is the case. It is where we are. Oh well. Wow. That is what it is. I am overrun for the day. I need to get ready for work. So I shall go do that. And it was lovely to have everyone drop on by. It was lovely to have a chat, a natter, a discourse, whatever we want to call this process that I so enjoy and so love, and really is my passion. Really is one of my passions. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye.
Rock it like you sew it.